I often get the question on how to create brushes in Grease Pencil, so let's go over the few steps to make customized assets and save them, and how the whole system works. So there's a few different steps that you need to pay attention to. So the first one is, what I recommend is to choose one of the brushes you have. So these ones are custom ones, but if you have only the original ones, start with one that looks already a bit like what you would like to have. So let's say the regular ink pen for now. Right click, that's the first step, and duplicate the asset. You can give it a name, just call it ink pen 2, and then you can assign it a library, and you should assign it a library. You need to create that library first. So for example, I have one with brushes, and then I will leave it in brushes with pencil draw. To create an asset library, you go into Edit Preferences, and then here in your preferences, I made this one. So this is just a folder on your computer that you need to reference into the file path asset libraries, and then it will appear there. So now you can see the duplicate is here, ink pen 2, and now we can start customize it. So the way Grease Pencil brushes work, they have a material attached. That's what you are painting with. So for example, when I'm drawing with the settings of that material, which you can see here as well. You can have it as a line, like this, or as dots. Dot means each time there is a point on your curve, there will be one dot or one stamp of your brush if you choose to use textures. So for example, these images, I just extracted them from the brushes I use in Photoshop or Krita or anything. The way you can do it is basically just use your brush, remove all the dynamic settings like size, rotation, color jitter or anything, and just do one click on your canvas, and then it's gonna print the stamp. It's best to have them white over transparent. That's how Blender understands it, because it will use the color as an alpha, so white is paint and black or transparent is nothing. So let's use this one for now. And now you see that the strokes that I drew has that texture, and you can change it at any time. And if you change the color, of course. So if you want the color of the vertex paint to affect, you need to activate the blend in the texture, which you don't need to do when you're in solid. Otherwise it will use the color of the image you are using. So that leads me to these settings at the top. The first one is your brush. So it's a duplicate of what you have down below here. And this one is the material as we've seen. Before saving your asset, what's important is to lock the material you are using. So for that, it's also best to use an appropriate name. You can say, if you don't lock it, next time when you reopen Blender and you want to use that new asset, it will not import the material that you've done with your settings. It will use the existing material in your blend file, which most likely will be black like we had earlier. Then you need to choose if you want to paint with the vertex color. So it means that you can change your strokes like that, or the color of the material, which is the base color shown here. Every strokes are going to be black. And when you decide one or the other, I also recommend to lock it. Like this, you know you will always paint with the vertex color. Then the radius, pressure sensitivity, strength, pressure sensitivity. Something to know about the pressure sensitivity and that setting is that if I click on this, when I press hard or not, that's when you can see the pressure happening. But the 1 is the maximum it will be able to go to. So if I put it at 0.5, the settings are gonna be acting differently. So the strength won't go above 0.2 even if I press very hard on it. And now it can go up to 1. You can see the transparency. Next setting, you can have the radius based on the scene or on the view. So it means that depending on how far you are zoomed in or out, the brush should stay coherent to that scale. Sometimes the preview is a bit strange when you are in a surface placement stroke. You can see that ring being very big or changing when you rotate your scene. I don't know if they will be able to fix this one day. And the spacing is like in Photoshop, the spacing between each strokes, smoothing, the angle of each point or stroke, the factor. So you can see that the factor affects the tapering, and then the hardness is how soft the brush is. Next, the post-processing. This one I will put back on the dot so you can see. Now, when I'm drawing, the density of the points, when I stop drawing, gets simplified. So this is great when you're drawing with the line type, and same as the GPSketch when you're drawing with the lines, because then it optimizes your drawing. You don't see a difference, but there is less points thanks to the smoothing, the simplify setting. So if I go back to dots and I remove the post-processing, you can see that the density of points remains the same. So that's quite important depending on how you want to paint and what type of brush you want to make. Because if you want to have a brush that feels like Photoshop, any other painting program, it's important to have quite a big density of points, because that's when you get the feeling of brush and actually textured brush. So this is quite important to know. And you can, of course, increase or decrease the amount. Then the randomize is really what you would expect, a random radius. So now it's creating very random scale of on each point. Same for the strength and the rotation. So if I put the rotation, now I have something that looks way more natural. And then the color jitters. So you have the ability to add color jitters on each of the values, like in Photoshop. And in Blender 4.5, they really improved it. It works way better than 4.3 and 4.4. And you can also limit it per strokes, which is also a very nice setting. I often like to have the value jitter based on strokes. I will show you by activating on all of them. So now every time I do a stroke, it has one consistent setting. Consistent color, hue and value. Now it's just too strong, but if I reduce. So this is really nice to have a bit of variation, and usually what I do is something like that. Like this, you have a bit of jitter, especially on hue and saturation. And then the value, which is also very important for readability, is only on strokes. Like this, it doesn't add too much visible noise. And then you just need to fine tune your settings depending on what you want to achieve as a brush. And usually very low settings work pretty well. Try with different colors, because you can see that the effect appears stronger with different hues. So be aware of which settings you want to try depending on the effects you want to have across the whole spectrum of colors. You can see how it appears a bit stronger with different type of hues. For example, the red one looks like there is way more hue jitter than on the green. And then the final one in the randomization, the jitter is like a scatter. I will remove the pressure sensitivity, and now you can see that there is a more scattered look. The stabilized stroke, I like to always keep it off, because you can activate it by pressing Shift when you're drawing.